now that you guys have some context on the conflict in the Congo, we're going to look at this complicated issue through a multi-stakeholder panel. And our first speaker is Professor Lee. He's a Congo Professor of Operations, Information, and Technology at the Graduate School of Business here at Stanford. His area of specialization is supply chain management, and his recent research is on building socially and environmentally sustainable supply chains. He is the founding and current director of Stanford Global Supply Chain Management Forum, an industry academic consortium to advance the theory and practice of global supply chain management. He is also currently the chairman of the advisory panel of investment responsibility and licensing at Stanford University. Our second speaker today is Patricia Jurewicz. She is one of the leading coordinators of the multi-stakeholder efforts to address conflict minerals. She coordinates NGO, company, and investor comments to the Securities and Exchange Commission on implementing supply chain regulation. She also sits on a number of advisory committees, such as the Conflict-Free Smelter Program. In addition, she helped coordinate joint institutional investor comments to the Securities and Exchange Commission and to Senator Corbett in support of the California legislation. We're also excited to hear from Zoe McMahon, who is HP's Global Program Manager for Supply Chain, Social and Environmental Responsibility. Based in Palo Alto, she is responsible for driving the overall vision and strategy for HP's Supply Chain Responsibility Program, ensuring buy-in and alignment with HP's supply chain executives. She's also responsible for end-to-end supplier assessment, auditing, and continuous improvement processes. Zoe is also a member of the board of directors of the Electronic Industry Citizenship Coalition, whose mission is to improve social and environmental conditions throughout global electronic supply chains. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to the panel.
Okay, well, good morning. Yes, thank you. Sorry that I'm in the middle of a teaching quarter, so I lost part of my voice, and this is why I need my microphone to help me. I'm delighted to be here to share with you, and in fact, I think the panel was organized in a very, very progressive way, which fits the theme. So I'm a person that studies supply chain management, and so I probably do not know as much detail of how the Congo conflict is happening, and in general, many of these atrocities are developing. But I will share with you how the general trend of supply chain management and risk management of many of the enterprises are progressing. And then my colleague Patricia will talk about some industry efforts in the electronic industries, and of course Zoe represents Hewlett Packard as well as some of the joint efforts. And so it's migrating from high-level overview and then industry level, and then also some company-level efforts. Supply chain and conflict, I think we all recognize that the conflict minerals constitute a major risk of many companies, many of the supply chains, because of the potential implications that if you are discovered to be using some of these conflict minerals. The problem is that, what is the consequence? What is the consequence if you, so yes, it seems like bad, yeah, we think that is bad. For those of us who are aware of the situation, we would say bad. If Apple is using it, or if some company is using it, it's definitely a very negative PR and image. But in general, do these companies care? Do they care because only a small subset of maybe consumers worry about this, but in general not? Well, in that case, let me start with talking about, in general, how do companies care about problems in their supply chain? And in these days, most supply chain companies use the term, it's a quite common term, not universal, but many of them, especially consulting companies, also help them to structure strategies called sense and respond to supply chains. What is sense and respond? Sense and respond means that you need to sense what's going on in the market, and sometimes unexpected events could happen. The earthquake of Japan happened. Of course, that one doesn't require sensing. Anyone who turn on the TV knows there's a Japan earthquake. But there are many, many disturbances that could happen in your supply chain, and you must put in place an information systems or an ability to find out what's going on in your supply chain. That requires you to have what I call the DNA of your products. That means that you have to know very carefully what goes into your product. When a Japan earthquake happens, a lot of companies did not realize actually some of their components came from Japan. And so only a few weeks later they discovered that there's a potential shortage. And that's because they have not studied and analyzed and understood the DNA of their products and the supply chain. And so you have to measure and track them. And the second one is that you have to monitor. Of course, not knowing where they come from, what makes up your supply chain products is not sufficient. We have to have a way to monitor to find out if things have gone wrong. And then if something has gone wrong, you have to act. And the action is the execution part. And the execution part requires us to work with partners, the alignment of incentives, alignment of accountability. So this is more the traditional supply chain, I would call it. Supply chain that increasingly are under stress because of the increasing risks. And by risk, in this case, I talk about risks that are disturbances. The tsunami, the hurricane, Katrina hurricane, the earthquake in Japan, the earthquake in Gujarat, in India, and those are disturbances. Even disturbances like the SARS virus, the disturbances of the longshoremen strike in Los Angeles are risks that regular supply chain has to be faced with. But increasingly, the risks are more than just some external disturbances. But the risk could be up in your supply chain, multi-levels up. Somebody is doing something harmful to the planet, and that could ultimately affect you. Affect you because of your reputation and because it could be harmful to your consumers and their liabilities. Here is an example of an organization in China called IPE, and what they do is it's very, very powerful because they started with just collecting data about pollution, water pollution in China. And then they put on the website and you can find out all pollutions. Of course, it's recorded pollution. China may have many more unreported pollution, we don't know. But these, at least for reported pollution, we can find out. What it did was it helped companies like Nike, Adidas, Patagonia, to go to the website, immediately see whether their suppliers have been doing something bad. Oftentimes, it's invisible to them, now it's visible. So the very first step is to bring visibility, sense. Sensing is important, and the environmental side is moving. Here is another example of, this time is not conflict mineral, but it is about the metal that pollute the environment. And again, this was brought up, and I would say that this is now beginning to be detected, that many of the activists and organizations use is the name and shame kind of tactic. So here is an example where iPhone 4 was using metals in China that pollute the environment. And of course, this article talks about Apple's stonewalling. So the tactics that Apple used in this case was, we're not denying, but we're not saying that it's right. This is the factory, maybe it's my factory, maybe not. But we never tell anyone who is my factory. So it's not denying, but not not agreeing to the news. Of course, you cannot continue this type of stonewalling. And so under pressure, now I think Apple has changed and disclosed many of the results. So in the environmental side, it seems like things are moving quite well. So the question is, can conflict mineral be able to have a similar kind of a path like what the environmental side has? Here is a single company that tried to do something different. This is Starbucks. Starbucks, of course, some side of Starbucks that people were criticizing them because they were leveraging, making use of the local communities in East Africa. But there are also other sides of Starbucks that try to do something right. And here is a program that they started a few years ago called the Coffee and Farm Equity Program, CAFE program, in which they try to score their suppliers and the suppliers network on whether they have economic transparencies, whether they're exploiting, who is exploiting whom. Second is to see whether they are treating the employees, whether the farmers, whether the farms or the landlords and processors are treating the employees humanely, giving them minimum wage, etc. And also how they're treating wastewater, fertilizers, and environmental issues. So at least this is one way to make a change. And the change is that you must work on incentive. The incentive is that you cannot always just simply beat on the suppliers. And so in the case of Starbucks, they try to say, if you are able to show me that you have done all these things right and I score you, I'm actually willing to pay 5 cents more per pound of coffee. And if you show continuous improvement, I'll pay another 5 cents.